Hi, this is Anita Hummel from the Dusty Roads podcast about living life as a global citizen. I spent over 30 years of my life living and working in mainly Asia. So if you're looking for some inside information about what it means to be a global citizen, you are in the right place. This is Anita, Dusty Roads, and this is episode 3. And today we're going to talk about some things we can learn from nomadic herders in Mongolia. In the spring of 2019, I went to Mongolia. And while I was there, I said, I need to do a couple things. And one was I wanted to ride a camel. And the other is I wanted to stay in a gyrt or a yurt. So I arranged a tour for me to go out to the Gobi desert and for me to stay with this nomadic family. I learned a lot from this family. I learned that the nomadic herders spend their life in some very harsh conditions. They live in these gyrs, or as we know them as yurts. And they'll move about 3 times a year. So 3 times or 4 times a year, they're essentially taking down their house, which is a tent or a series of tents. And then they're moving to a new location. And they're doing this because of their herds, so that the herds can have better grazing land. The weather's extreme. It can get very, very cold in Mongolia. Think of Siberia, and then you can kind of think of Mongolia in the winter. You know, while we were staying in this gyrt, and this family, they just casually mentioned that the last winter it was so cold and it was so brutal that they lost 30 horses. And it was interesting, as we were driving into some of these areas, I could see carcasses of some horses and animals, that were still there and hadn't been picked up yet from the winter. Because remember, I was there in May, and in fact, one of the days I was there, this was in mid-May, it still snowed. So they hadn't quite, gotten out to these areas and picked it all up from this winter. So I asked them, I began to ask a little bit, being a bit of a business person, I wanted to kind of know what's the value of the horse and, how great of a loss was this? And it ended up being about $12,000 or more dollars. And this, I thought, would have been a small fortune for probably almost anyone to lose, but especially for Mongolian nomadic herders and for this family. As I listened to the story about the loss of these horses, and I felt absolutely no bitterness. I felt, no bitterness. I felt absolutely no bitterness. I felt no anger. I felt nothing. All I felt was that basically they were just like, this is kind of the way life is. This is what happens, is sometimes we lose. I thought about them, and I thought about a couple things that we can learn from these nomadic herders in our lives. First, we can learn to all keep moving forward. Bad things are going to happen. Harsh winters are going to come. Cold is going to come in. Things are going to come in which are completely and totally out of our control. Things that we cannot control at all. But we have to sometimes just get up and have the grit and the fortitude and the perseverance to keep moving forward. Some days it may be hard to keep one foot in front of the other. But the more we keep moving forward, the easier this will get to keep moving forward. The other thing is that bad things can happen, so just learn to handle them. This is just a fact of life. Life will never be easy and smooth. And I know we all want it to be easy and smooth. I know I want it to be easy and smooth. But we have to be prepared to be able to handle hardships in life. So we need to think about, if bad things are going to happen, how are we going to handle this? What are we going to do? And then we need to do the best we can to be able to try to control them or to minimize them and to be able to realize that it's going to happen. The worst thing we can do at this point is to just sort of freeze up and do nothing. And the thing that I learned about these nomadic herders is they couldn't do this. They tried all they could to save the horses, but they could not withstand the extremely cold climate that they were under. So they had to make a choice. So they decided that they were going to accept this hardship and loss, and they were not going to quit, but they were going to have the grit and perseverance in life to keep going. They were not bitter. They taught me that we can choose not to allow our hardships to make us bitter. Bitterness is a choice. Something happens like you lose 30 horses because of the extreme cold. It's not a choice. It's gift. It's a gift, or it's a curse from nature, whatever you want to call it. It's something that can't be controlled, but our bitterness is something we can control. We can choose how we decide to react to that, what we decide to do. Bitterness can be like a disease. It can kill our grit and our perseverance. it can kill our ability to be successful. It can kill our ability to be able to press through the hard times and to really make it through those hard times so that we can have the success we deserve. The other thing I felt was gratitude. In some odd way, they were grateful. They besides the horses, they had a couple horses left, but they still had their camels, they had their goats, and they had their sheep. And so they felt the sense of gratitude that, okay, I've lost these horses, which was a terrible thing. It was a huge financial loss, but I didn't lose my entire herd, because they knew of some of the nomadic herders who lost their entire herd and lost everything. And they literally lost their business from one cold winter. They had some neighbors that this had happened to, so they were grateful that this didn't happen to them. You know, for a nomadic herder to usually lose everything means that they'd have to pack up their gear or their tent, and they'd have to move everything to the girt district in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia's capital. And then they would have to try to find some work in a factory. So for them to lose all of their herd also meant they would lose their entire way of life. It would have been a loss of freedom, a loss of their livelihood, a loss of everything. My nomadic herders taught me that we can choose to be grateful for the blessings we have, that despite our loss, we can be thankful for what we do have. The other thing they taught me was to learn to work. I was up early in the morning on the day that I was there, probably about 5 a.m. And I went outside to sit and look at the countryside. Well, my nomadic herder friend was already up working, and so was the rest of some of his friends. He had some other nomadic herder friends coming from other parts that were coming to help him. And the reason they were coming to help him was he had about 50 camels and he couldn't find his camels. So all of these herders were helping each other, and they were going out and they were trying to find these camels. And it was really quite a scene to see, because they had these dirt bikes, these motorbikes that they were riding, and they were going up in these sand and through the desert, and the wheels were spinning and the dust was flying as they were going out to find these camels that were lost that they needed to be able to gather in. Despite these setbacks that they had about these 30 horses being lost, they still got up and they were still working. They were still going out there and work. They were still going out there and getting something done and trying to make a difference. They didn't have the luxury to sleep in, cry themselves to sleep, to stay outside, to basically do nothing. Even though they had this huge setback in life, they need to get up, get dressed, go out the door, feed the herd, gather the herd, find the herd, and do all those things that they needed to do, because they knew that there was someone or something dependent upon them. These are some wonderful lessons that we're able to learn from some people in other parts of the world that are sort of, maybe they're the unknown. They're the ones that that are sitting in our homes in the Western world. We don't think about some of these other people in these other parts of the world and what they go through in their lives. And as I reflected upon this, my night in the girt and my time out in the Gobi desert, I thought about these lessons that I had learned from them. These lessons of grit, perseverance to keep on going, despite how much the hardships were in life, to just keep on going. We hope that you've enjoyed this podcast, and we do have a blog which talks more about this, called What Are the Nomadic Herders in Mongolia? And you can, of course, find that blog on our website, abussonadustyroad.com. Thank you so much for listening and joining us. And if you have a chance, rate our podcast. It really does help. And give us a thumbs up. That helps too. Thanks so much. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give us a thumbs up and rate this podcast. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any suggestions or something you'd love to have us talk about, please let us know. We'd certainly love to hear from you. Please go to our website, A Bus on a Dusty Road, and we love to be able to engage with our audience. Thank you so much. This podcast is sponsored by A Bus on a Dusty Road, a blog about living life as a global citizen. please go to our blog at abusonadastyroad.com and sign up for our free newsletter. If you've enjoyed this podcast, give us a thumbs up, leave us a review, and help to pass this along. Thank you so much for listening.